Welcome to All About the Questions. We're learning to ask the right questions, lifelong success. Now, here to help you ask all the right questions is author, international speaker, and business strategist.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of It's All About the Questions. Always excited to be here with you, and today I have a guest that I am so excited that he said to be on the show for many, many reasons. He's out in Arizona today doing 2 book signings because today is the launch of his latest book. I have Brad Taylor here today, everybody, the author of the Pike Logan Thriller series. He's got his new book coming out, Operator Down, and we're just going to launch right in because I'm so excited to have him here. So, Brad, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I was telling you this before the show started, but I did a binge of your books over the last 5 days, starting with the advanced copy I got of Operator Down, which, by the way, congratulations on launch day.
Thank you.
This is sure to be another New York Times bestseller book. It is really wonderful and so different, yet fits totally beautifully inside the Pike Logan series of books. But I binged read your books. I got through 5 of them over the course of the last 5 days, so a book a day.
Yeah, let's hope it's better than Game of Thrones. Better for binging.
Oh, so much better. And what I love about binge reading book series like yours is you get the nuances of the character development. And you really, when I'm reading your books, you get it. Like I'm in there. I can feel the moments of what's happening. I can see how you're developing the characters. And that's not something that every author is able to do over the course of the number of books you've written. What is it about your characters that is so powerful to you?
Well, actually, the characters is what matters the most to me. I mean, I write, military thrillers that involve counterterrorism and that kind of stuff, all the neat widgets and things like that. But at the end of the day, the characters are that's what everybody cares about. I mean, if I'm writing about a bomb in the middle of a parking lot and the parking lot's empty, who cares? You care if somebody's going to get hurt. And the characters have to grow. And that actually was when I first started writing, I mean, I had no idea I was going to be a writer. I didn't know there was going to be 1 book, much less 12. And so I started to set out to consciously have these guys grow. And that turned out to be kind of false. It was a false note. And now just kind of, people grow just by their interactions in day-to-day life. What they do every day informs how they're going to grow as a person. And I kind of just let that happen in the writing. The characters have to move forward because that's what happens in real life, but they can't go so far forward that you don't recognize them from book to book. Book 1, Pike's like this, book 2, he's completely different. And so it was hard. It's one of the hardest things to do.
I have you may not know this. I have a book out, but I write nonfiction, and this whole idea of carrying a character that you've created in your head through is, to me, something that's a true gift. Now, you are former U.S. Army, I think 20 or 21 years, right? Thank you for your service, by the way. My dad was Army, so Army holds a very special place in my heart, and I just interred my dad's ashes up in New York, and we had the military honors for it. And
good.
It's a beautiful thing. Now, you also served as part of Delta Force, which is not something that everybody does. My friend, Colonel Deb Lewis, when I was asking her if she knew you, because you guys crossed in some of your operational things, she goes, "No, I'd never know who he was. He was Delta Force. He's invisible. We don't know who they are. They just disappear and do their thing." How do you reconcile being somebody that had to be invisible to who you are now as a Brad Taylor, New York Times bestselling author?
It was incredibly difficult. In fact, it still is. I don't like doing interviews. I mean, you spend your whole life hiding in the corner, not telling anybody what you do, and then you're supposed to get out in front of a bunch of people and talk about some book you've written. It was hard to get over, and it's still something that I don't do near as much publicity as I should. I don't do near as much touting, I guess, of myself as I should. I just don't. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and I just don't do it.
So why write then?
Because I enjoy writing. I've always been a voracious reader. Like I said, I never intended to be published author. I just had in the back of my head that someday I was going to write a book. And I left Fort Bragg and was teaching down at the Citadel. And I literally had a ton of time on my hands. Instead of working 24/7, getting 4 hours sleep, it was like a 9-to-5 job teaching. I mean, it was fulfilling work, but I had a lot of time on my hands. And so I said I was going to write a book, and to my wife, and she, of course, laughed at me. I figured it'd sit on the nightstand, and that would be it. Bucket list met. And it sold. And the publisher asked if I could write another one. And I said, I think so. I came on a promotion list to colonel. My daughter was entering high school. I was supposed to go back to Bragg. I had a lot of competing things going on, and I decided to retire from the military. Right.
And I know for a lot of military guys, because I've interviewed a number, including Brandon Webb, that transition moment, even when you have family or don't have family, is something that doesn't always go so smoothly. Is there one thing that you can point to that made it possible for you to make that transition? Is there a question you asked yourself that helped you make that transition?
No, I guess I've been really lucky. I've read about that quite a bit, transitioning from the military, and I did serve close to 22 years, so it's definitely been ingrained in me. It wasn't like I did 2 years and got out. But I do a lot of security consulting, at least I used to. I don't do near as much as I used to. And so I still had my finger in the well. I still had my friends. It honestly was not that big of a transition for me. And it may have been from the unit I came from. I was already outside the norms of the regular military and the usual left, right, left marching type stuff. I don't know. Just when I retired, I had my goal in mind, and I focused wholeheartedly on my goal, which is to be a writer, and just plowed right into it. And I still did security consulting, so I still kept my finger on the pulse and still saw people that I knew. But it honestly was not that huge of a transition for me.
It sounds like it was time then. It was just the next natural transition for you.
No, I don't know if it was just time. I mean, I certainly miss it. Don't get me wrong. It was a hard decision, a very hard decision. And, you kind of feel like a deserter, to be honest with you. Everybody else is still in the fight, and you're leaving. It was not an easy decision. But it's just the mechanics of transitioning. It wasn't like, I've read stories where you get out in the civilian world and you're staring at people, they don't understand me, and woe is me. It wasn't like that.
Well, I'm really glad it wasn't like that for you and for your family as well, because it probably helps things there. You mentioned you had a daughter?
Yeah, I've got 2 daughters, actually. My older daughter was just entering high school. And once you come out on the bird colonel list, you're like what they're called a senior leader, which means you're doing jobs at 1 year or 2 years at a time, which means she would have moved to at least 3 high schools before she graduated. My wife had done the same thing because her dad was in the Air Force, and I didn't want to put my daughter through that. That was one of the reasons for retiring.
Now, your last assignment was at the Citadel. We've heard stories, those of us who are not part of the military other than through, like my dad and a lot of friends that I have in it. When we think of the Citadel, we think of a place where there's a lot of regimentation, and that the people who are teaching these kids are trying to help them be the next leaders of our country. Is that the reality of it?
That is the aspiration of it, most assuredly. That's exactly what they're trying to do. But make no mistake, it's a college. I have some history at the Citadel. My father graduated from the Citadel. I have a twin brother who graduated from the Citadel. So I grew up in Citadel lore. And then I went to teach at the Citadel, and I really enjoyed it. It was a great time. It's a great school, and they certainly tried very hard to do exactly what you're saying. But at the end of the day, it is a college, and they're college students.
So it's the non-military version of West Point.
Well, it's called a senior military college. There's actually 7 of them. VMI, for instance, Norwich is another one. Citadel.
Okay. I remember reading when they had their first women to go to the Citadel and what that was like, and then meeting my friend Colonel Deb Lewis, first female graduating class of West Point. And I read your books, and there are such strong female characters in them. And when we come back from our commercial break, I'd like to explore how you developed those characters, but we'll be right back after this first commercial break.
Success comes from not only what you know, but also who you know. Back to It's All About the Questions with award-winning author Laura Stewart.
Brad, before the commercial break that so rudely interrupted us, although we got to love our commercial sponsors, they keep the radio station running, so I'm not going to complain too much. I was setting up this question. You have such strong female leads in your book, especially in Operator Down, your latest book, which launches today and can be purchased wherever books are sold. But if you're in the listening area here in Vero Beach, go to the Vero Beach Book Center, because Brad is going to be there on January 14th at 3 p.m. at the Vero Beach Book Center signing books. So get a copy of his book, read it, and be there, because it's going to be so cool. So you have these really strong female leads, which is not very common in the genre of books that you're writing. Where did the inspiration for this character of Jennifer and Shoshana, which, by the way, I wish I had half the fearlessness that they have?
Well, originally, when I first started writing, I was going to write a story of redemption, and I happened to be Special Forces, so that made Pike an operator. But if he'd have been if I'd have been a policeman, he'd have been a cop. If I'd have been a priest, he'd have been taking confession. And I had in my head all along on the story of redemption that it would be a female character in the first book. And so when I wrote Jennifer, originally she's a complete civilian, doesn't know anything about what's going on as far as military goes. And so I developed her that way. And she's grown quite a bit, which it was hard to write her. I mean, if you look at the transition, I'm actually kind of embarrassed when I read One Rough Man, my first novel, because she cusses like a sailor. That's the way military people do.
Yep.
That's not the way females do. And so
well,
I had a lot of learning curve. Well, I served with people in the military, females in the military quite a bit, obviously. And so I reached out to them. And, boy, were they brutal. It'd be 1 minute that she'd never do that. Give her a spine, and then I'd do it. And she'd, what are you doing? She's not a man. And so it'd go back and forth until I got a handle on exactly how I wanted her to grow.
Well, she has certainly grown. Is that similar to what you did with the Shoshana character? Because she's very different from Jennifer.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Shoshana was Shoshana was a one-off. In Days of Rage, I pulled those two Israeli assassins in, and I was going to whack them at the end of the book. They were there for the specific plot that's in Days of Rage. If you read the book, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, they were going to die, and that would be the end of them. And I ended up liking them too much, and so I let them live. And then a couple of books later, I had a scene where I had to do something. I needed a character, and I could either go straight out of whole cloth, and I said to myself, no, I think I'll pull in Aaron and Shoshana. They were actually in Jordan, so it fit.
Right.
And I pulled them back in. And I got a lot of emails about them. Fans seemed to love them, so I guess my instincts were correct, because I loved them, and turns out the fans did. And in Operator Down, this is the very first book I've ever actually really set out and planned character-wise. And I set out originally saying that in this book, I'm going to bring Aaron and Shoshana back just because I like them. That was my one going-in point. 2, I wanted to make it personal. And 3, I wanted to go to someplace I hadn't been before. But starting off with Aaron and Shoshana, obviously, as far as the universe goes, it necks down immediately. Okay, your ideas for plot get necked down because the Israeli, you've got to figure out how would they ever get involved here. Instead of the reverse of, I need a character, and hey, look, they just happen to fit.
And you said that this is a departure in terms of the book development for you. You typically put out 2 Pike Logan books a year. And
I was.
Okay. And this one is a departure. Can you talk us through that process?
Sure. I was doing 2 books a year. Well, what actually happened was I was doing, like I said, I was doing security consulting. So I was getting my books in basically 6 months early because I would look at the schedule and say, writing wasn't providing a living. I still had to feed my family. And so I would look at the schedule and say from, the book say it's due in December, I would look at my schedule and say, well, from June to December, you're going to be gone doing consulting. You're not going to be able to write. You got to get the book in June. And so I did. And, of course, the publisher did cheetah flips over that. But then I was saying, get the book out, because when you write about current events, the problem with current events is they're current. And if you're writing the bow crest as tightly as I'd like to do, one thing going wrong could ruin the entire book. For instance, One Rough Man, there's a lot of Iran play in there. And back when I came out in 2011, we were rattling sabers against Iran pretty hard for the nuclear program. and there was a 50-50 chance we were going to go to war. Well, if we went to war with Iran, the whole book would be irrelevant. So those kind of things happen all the time where I'm like, we got to get this book out, because if this pops the wrong way, and like the Insider Threat, I started writing about ISIS right when they came on the scene, way before they were such a huge deal. We took over Mosul. They took over Mosul, and when I was writing the book, I said, we got to get this book out, because if we go in and kick them out of Mosul, the book's no good. I didn't think we would, and it turns out we didn't, so it worked out. But when I'm writing the books, I was getting them 6 months early, and my publisher finally got a little bit aggravated about me saying, get the book out, get the book out. And he said, okay, why don't we do, you're not the only author in our stable. You're lined up for December. Your book's going to sit on the shelf until December rolls around. Why don't you do 2 books a year? And I said, at that point, okay, I'll give it a try. But that ended up being an incredibly grueling pace, because you're not doing 2 books a year. You're publicizing 1 book, editing a 2nd book, and starting a 3rd book. It's a grueling pace. And I still had the consulting, and still was going overseas doing the book research. In Ring of Fire, my last book, I told the publisher, I said, I'm not going to be able to keep this pace. And keep the quality, definitely. There was no way I could keep the quality and keep the pace. And so this book went back to 1 book a year.
How did that change the writing for you? Your research is legendary. Including some crazy things that happened to you that made it into Operator Down when you decided to have a major part of the book happen in, I hope I don't slaughter it, Lesotho?
It's Lesotho. It looks like Lesotho.
Okay.
You're not incorrect. I called it Lesotho until I hit the country.
Okay.
I learned it was called Lesotho.
Lesotho, okay. How did, planning this book make a difference for your research, or didn't it?
It didn't make a difference as far as the specific steps I go through to do the research, but it did make a difference in the sense that I said, I'm not going to go, like I said, I wanted to make it personal, and I said, I'm not going to go chase the whatever headline's hot today, trying to predict what's going to happen with, Boko Haram or ISIS or whoever. I said what I'm going to do is I want to find a plot that would definitely be realistic, definitely be true, but not necessarily make the American news cycle, because there's tons of stuff that happens that we don't ever hear about. And so I started researching. First of all, like I said, the end point, I got to have Israel involved somehow.
Right.
And so I started doing a ton of research on Israel and hit upon the diamond trade, which is very big in Israel. They're the biggest diamond exchange in the world. Well, Antwerp will claim they are, but those two fight it out for the title. And so I started swimming upstream in the diamond trade, which took me into the kimberlite mines in Africa. And then I had an idea, well, maybe I'll do a coup. A plot for a coup began to form. And I started looking at the countries that were over there that had the mines, and most of them that had coup potential were horrifically bad. I don't want to go visit them. Sierra Leone, things like that. I was like, I really don't want to go to that country.
Well, that's scary, considering Special Forces, Delta Force guy, you don't want to go there.
No, why would you? It's the dump. It's not even fun. I just didn't have any interest in going there. And I hit on Lesotho, which actually has some of the largest gem-quality diamonds in the world come out of Lesotho. And it's its own country. It's a microstate surrounded by South Africa. I didn't even know it existed, I'm embarrassed to say, until I did the research. It's a microstate like Monaco or like the Vatican City. And they produce some of the biggest gem-quality diamonds in the world. And they also have a history of coups. And so that's how I came upon them.
The story for me evolved differently than your other books. And perhaps it's because of the difference in thought process for writing it. Even reading over the weekend Enemy of Mine, Widow's Strike, All Necessary Force, and several of your other books, they still held because I feel like we're still in those situations, especially Widow's Strike, where there's the woman martyring herself with a bomb, but she's been turned into a viral load that can just create a pandemic in the world. This one read differently for me, and it was more thoughtful. Just for me, when I was reading it, and the pieces evolved a little bit differently. I'm trying to figure out how to describe it. And
yeah, well, I did. Like I said, I did set out specifically as I'm going to make this personal instead of, as you said, the pandemic that'll wipe out the world or something like that. It's a personal story. You're more concerned about the specific characters involved than you are concerned about what's going to happen on the world stage.
Yeah, and I liked it. Once I got past this isn't the same, I went, wow, this is a whole new level of Brad Taylor. So I want to thank you for shaking it up.
It's still got the same gunfights, and it certainly ends with a bang. It's
oh my God, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I'm sitting there in my house reading this book, and like I could feel my shoulders going up, and I'm like, what's going to happen next? And I just kept turning the page after page after page. Like, I got to know what happens to Aaron and Shoshana and Pike and everybody. So yeah, totally holds up, and it's a page turner. I read it in about 7 hours.
Oh.
I speed read, but I actually slowed myself down to read this because I needed to slow it down for myself. It's probably the only way I could have gotten through 5 of your books this weekend, because I needed to go back to the original books just to have them at top of my head for the interview today. And we're going to go into the national news, and we'll be back with Brad Taylor, who's going to be here in Vero Beach in town January 14th at 3 p.m. at the Vero Beach Book Center. And when we come back from the news break, we're going to talk more about his latest book, Operator Down.
Welcome to It's All About the Questions, where learning to ask the right questions can help you achieve lifelong success. Now, here to help you ask all the right questions is award-winning author, international speaker, and business strategist, Laura Stewart.
Welcome back, everyone. I am here with Brad Taylor, a New York Times bestselling author, on launch day of his new Pike Logan thriller, Operator Down, which I'm going to give 5 stars to. I got an advance copy of this book, and I read it in about 7 hours, and it's about 500 pages, and I could not put this book down. It is amazing. I highly encourage everybody to go out there and buy it. He's going to be here in town in Vero Beach, for those of you who are listening to me live on iHeartRadio. For those listening in 60 countries around the world, on the podcast recording portion of this, you're probably going to miss the January 14th book signing in Vero Beach, but I encourage you to get the book on Amazon or wherever books are sold, because it's so great. So Brad, thanks again for being here with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm enjoying it.
Good, cool. So I know I said that Operator Down is different than the other books, and it is, but it isn't. It is different in that it's not necessarily something that's ripped from the headlines that we know about.
Right.
But when I felt like I'm reading it, I went, oh, this is the stuff they don't tell us, that we're not privy to.
Well, no, I like I said, I guess the closest comparison to it would be No Fortunate Son, with the stakes in the plot line itself. Now, most of the stories that, when I have a book that hits the stands, and then everybody's like, oh, Brad's precious. For instance, in Days of Rage, I had Boko Haram. Nobody ever heard of Boko Haram. And the book came out, and then they kidnapped all the kids, and everybody's like, oh, look at Brad. He knows, he's ripping the headline. Well, the truth of the matter is, Boko Haram's been lopping off heads since 2009, and a lot of people know about Boko Haram, just not the average American. And so I was looking for a story kind of like that, not necessarily something that would make the news, but it would certainly make the news in that local area. For instance, in South Africa, if there was a coup in Lesotho, make no mistake, that would be major news. But it probably wouldn't make the headlines in the United States.
Well, there's a lot, I think, that doesn't make the headlines in the United States that we kind of would like to know about. And for you, with the worlds that you've traveled in, you see and hear things that the average person in the world would never have access to, or if they did, wouldn't even understand the significance of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say they wouldn't understand. It's just, I spend about literally 2 hours every morning going through news feeds, and I've cultivated news feeds from all over the world. There's a lot of good information out there. It's just hard to sort through the good information versus the bad information. And once again, I do security consulting, and so you bump into people and talk to them about what's going on.
Now, on your bio, when I was you have several different bios all over the place. On the web, in the back of your books. And it was interesting to me. So you have an advanced degree from the Naval Warfare College in irregular warfare. You're a security consultant in asymmetric threats. I read those words and I go, well, isn't all warfare irregular? And
No, not at all.
okay, what?
It's basically asymmetric threats. Symmetric warfare is basically what we're looking at with North Korea. Force on force. They've got artillery, we've got artillery. They've got tanks, we've got tanks. They've got infantry, we've got infantry. Asymmetric threat is what we were fighting in Syria and Iraq and that kind of place. When we did Desert Storm, and it was predicted to be this 3-month slogfest with 8,000 casualties, and it ended in 4 days with the United States basically crushing the fourth largest army in the world. The whole world took notice, and make no mistake, what they noticed was, you're not going to defeat the United States force on force. We got to find another way. And every other country started looking at that.
Okay, so if every other country started looking at the ways to make it so that force on force didn't work, what would you say is something that the average individual needs to begin thinking about to protect themselves or to keep themselves a little bit more present in the world?
Well, if you just look at the world stage, for instance, Ukraine. Ukraine was hybrid warfare. That was an asymmetric fight. There was an enormous information dominance that went on as far as propaganda and stuff inside Ukraine. The Crimea was all the soldiers that went in there was a popular uprising and all this kind of stuff. We find out later that Russia had actually infiltrated Spetsnaz, their version of special forces, into Ukraine and started fighting. And all that stuff that's asymmetric. He didn't roll in with tanks. He took that country over subliminally, basically.
And now there's all the cyber terrorism threats.
Exactly. Yeah.
I remember reading, I don't remember if it was a Vince Flynn or Tom Clancy book a number of years ago, where they talked about China basically doing financial warfare on the United States. And your books are, to me, you wrap a lot of those same concepts, that it's not just, I guess now, I have the terms now, it's not just force on force anymore. There's all these other layers to it.
Yeah, in the Polaris protocol, I looked at the GPS constellation because I was astounded at how much the GPS constellation runs our life. People look at GPS as a location service you have in your car. It tells me where I'm going. Well, it turns out that the way that GPS functions is on a timing mechanism. The timing is so precise. It's the most precise timing in the world. And it's got these signals. That's how it tells you where you are. Three of them sending out these signals. And when the signals bounce back to the satellite, they get a timestamp. When they adjudicate the timestamp between three signals, they know where you are. Well, because of that, because the timing's so precise, we use GPS in things you wouldn't even believe. Your gas pump, when you run your credit card, it's using GPS signals through the timing for the stamp on your credit card. Cell phones use the same timing. When you talk on a cell phone, I'm talking to you right now, and you can clearly hear me. But when I go over the cell network, my voice is broken up into 1,000 different pieces and put back together on the far end. Those 1,000 different pieces are all timed by the GPS. If we lost GPS, it would be horrendously bad, and not just because we couldn't drop a missile.
I have all these thoughts going through my head, including, for weird reason, I had flashbacks to Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, when Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, when he particulated that kid across the TV, and then Star Trek with the transporters, that this whole concept of GPS that you just completely shifted for me is a massive key to how we live the world today, and I never thought of it. It's just how you got from place to place.
Yeah, the good thing about it is, people talk about spending money on the military. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of spending money on the military, not wasting money, don't get me wrong, but spending money on R&D. A lot of the functions in the modern-day world that we take for granted came from military applications. The basis thing, believe it or not, chicken McNuggets came from military trying to figure out how to put food out in a package that would stay stable so they could eat it in the field.
So it's like meals ready to eat, MREs?
That's what it is now. Yeah, that was way back when. But a lot of the military technology that comes out. Well, for instance, this is a little known fact: your drive-through. The reason you have a drive-through in every McDonald's in the world is because of the military. Because one McDonald's in California, because the military has all kinds of rules, you are not allowed to eat inside the restaurant, any restaurant, in uniform. So if you want to eat outside during lunch, you had to change uniform. So McDonald's said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll give you the food right there in your car. And the drive-in was born.
Wow, that is so cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What other fascinating facts do you have that we don't know, Brad?
I don't know, I have to think a while, but there's a few of them.
Okay, let's...
Yeah, actually, just the biggest one, obviously, is the Internet. And that was done by the Navy, DARPA.
Yeah, I'm a geek. I owned a tech services company. We did cybersecurity stuff and everything, so I'm a huge... thank God for DARPA.
Yeah.
Made my life easier and more complicated from the days I had my tech company. And if it wasn't for DARPA, there wouldn't be cyber threats, right?
Right.
So,
well, we wouldn't have the Internet. There's always a good and bad.
Yeah.
Yin and yang.
I remember the days when all computers were air-gapped, meaning they didn't have a connection to the Internet.
Yeah, I had when I was in college, I had a Apple IIe that I had to get a waiver from my college to allow me to turn in a dot matrix printer instead of a typewritten page.
Yeah, because it was like that wasn't done. You just didn't do it.
Right.
All right, so your new book, Operator Down, there is an interrogation scene in the beginning of the book.
Yes.
That when I was doing some research, I heard that really happened to you while you were researching the book. You willing to share?
Yeah, sure. I was an idiot. That was really stupid. So I like doing, like I said, on-the-ground research. And I'd already been to Cape Town and Joburg, Johannesburg, and Israel. And I was going to Lesotho. And the book is obviously about a coup in Lesotho. So I met my guide and told her what I wanted to do. And I said I was writing a book. I didn't tell her what it was about because I don't want to scare her away. But I wanted to see all these sites. So we went around to see them all. I didn't do anything touristy. I was taking pictures of Missouri, the capital there, is basically the entire country. Every other thing is just a village. There's nothing there. So if you could take over that city, you would take over the country for all practical purposes. And there's certain key pieces in this single points of failure in that city that I'd done the research on that I wanted to go find because I was going to write about them in the book. So I took pictures of Parliament, the Prime Minister's residence, the police station, the radio station, TV station, the Internet hub, that kind of stuff. And I wanted to figure out where the Special Forces base was because it's impossible. You can't find that on Google. And so the guy took me there, and I went to the front gate and was eliciting information from the guy at the front gate. First, I tried to get on. He wouldn't let me on. And so my guide said, well, we'll drive over here. You can look at it from the hill over here. And so we did. And I saw a guy walking the fence line. I went up there and talked to him. Like an idiot, said, I used to be in the military, and started asking questions. And another guy ran up, and he went crazy on the cell phone. And the next thing I knew, two SUVs pulled up and threw me in the back and drove me on the base. And next thing you know, I got interrogated for 6.5 hours of being an American spy. It wasn't very pleasant.
I'm speechless because you say it just sort of nonchalantly and to the...
Well, it was that was really stupid. I mean, I did what I could to sterilize myself. You know, I stuck my camera underneath the seat and hid it and everything I could, clean pockets, what I could do. And I went in there and just said I was a tourist. I didn't want them to Google my bio. That would have been the end of the days for me. If they'd seen my bio, they'd have been convinced I was a spy.
Right.
And they found the camera, brought it in, and sure enough, there's no tourist pictures on it. There's a Prime Minister's picture of his residence, has a sign in it that says no photos. It's on my camera. And they went crazy. Well, what I didn't understand at the time, I had done my research on, they'd had a semi-coup, pseudo-coup in 2014. And the argument going on with the Prime Minister, the head of the LDF, was he'd been around forever and was building a huge power base, and the Prime Minister was afraid that this guy was going to take over the country. And so he demanded he retire. This is 2014. The head of the LDF, his three-star general, said, I'm not going to retire. So they had this little fight. So the Prime Minister said, that's fine. Then I'll just appoint somebody else ahead, and you can just keep your Army paycheck, but you're no longer in charge of the LDF. Well, 2 weeks later, that new guy was found underneath the bridge dead. And then the Prime Minister and all the members of Parliament fled the country, went to Johannesburg, claiming their lives were threatened. And that was kind of the end of the story for me.
And that's where we're going to go into the last commercial break. We'll be right back with more from Brad Taylor.
Success comes from not only what you know, but also who you know. Welcome back to It's All About the Questions with award-winning author Laura Stewart.
Hard to believe the show is almost over. It just goes way too fast. So, Brad, you were saying that we were talking about the actual interrogation you went through and how it played out. And then last thing you said was that was the end of the story for me.
That was the end of the story that I knew. Well, it turned out that this was 2014. This is now 2017, and the head of the LDF had retired a week before I hit the country. And he'd done so because the U.S. ambassador and U.S. embassy had generated enormous pressure withholding funds and things like that. So two things came into play there. One, this was still a sore wound, and two, they hated the U.S. And they were convinced I was some kind of spy for the U.S. And the third thing I found out was there was a Special Forces security assessment team that had landed at the embassy. They were convinced I was part of that team doing some kind of nefarious stuff to overthrow the LDF. I didn't know any of that stuff when I hit the ground, and I learned quite a bit while I was under interrogation.
Yeah,
they weren't that good. It was a little bit. They did. So I recognized most of the techniques they used, but they did things that it would have been a lot worse. For instance, my phone had a lot of incriminating stuff on it, and they didn't make me unlock it because I told them I didn't have any service. So that was kind of a mistake on their part. They didn't search my pockets. I had some incriminating stuff in my pockets. So all in all, I was pretty lucky.
And you got some great material for your book.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm glad that you made it out okay, and that your driver and everybody was okay as well. That's the reality, I guess, of being an American traveling somewhere. And
no, actually, it was. I was stupid. Number one, there's 100 different things I could have done that would have gotten me out of there a lot quicker. If I'd have taken one-for-one pictures of touristy stuff, for instance, it would have been a lot better.
Okay.
But the fact that I was a U.S. citizen, I knew held weight. I mean, there was. I was debating whether to ask for the embassy. I knew they hated the embassy so much, so I stayed away from that. But at the very end, I was like, okay, I've had enough of this. I'm going to ask for the embassy. And that's when they let me go before I even got the words out of my mouth. I got a big speech by the commander came in, and just as it plays out in the book, commander came in, gave me a big speech, and I realized he really does think I'm an SF spy, and he thinks I'm going to go back to the ambassador and give him this speech. It's all about American relations and things like this. And then they let me go.
It was riveting reading.
The funniest thing was, it's not in the book. When I flew out of Lesotho, that head interrogator, the frog, which is in the book, he got on my plane.
Really?
Thought, holy moly, they're going to jerk me off the plane. And when he got on the plane, it's a little bitty single-seater puddle jumper type thing, seat on the left, seat on the right. So it's not like you're going to hide from him. And he got on, locked eyes with me. I saw his eyes go comically wide, and I thought, oh, he doesn't know I'm on this plane. And he's doing something he shouldn't be doing because now he's in civilian clothes and stuff. I said, I should make the scene right now. I should get him in trouble. Of course I didn't. I got off the plane as soon as it landed in Joburg and ran away.
Yeah, why make more trouble than you have to? With the world today and how it looks and what we're seeing in the United States and all the threats, you've got 20 plus years of experience in the military, and you do security consulting. I'd love to ask you this question, and hopefully you'll answer it. What would you do to change things? If you could change something in the world, what would you do?
You mean if I could change something holistically? If I could wave a wand right now, I would change the Saudi Arabian spread of Wahhabism. That would be the number one thing I would do.
Do you have any ideas on how that could be done?
Well, MSP, the new Deputy Crown Prince, is doing it right now, hopefully. I mean, he's doing a lot of different initiatives, female driving, cracking down on religious police, stopping the clerics from... basically, Saudi Arabia made a deal with the devil way back when. In order to remain in power, the House of al-Assad to remain in power gave the clerics enormous leeway to do what they wanted. And then to keep the clerics happy, they spread the Wahhabism throughout the world. Funding, basically they'd go to a country like Morocco and say, we'll build all your mosques for you because we love you, except you're going to have our clerics. And so Wahhabism started spreading, and it's a virulent strain that's caused enormous problems.
So what can we do as an average person to try to help that shift? Or can't we? There's nothing we can do. I don't know.
There's not a whole lot we can do. We can certainly do things. Everybody's afraid. You see there's a lot of, I'm afraid of Muslims, this and that and the other thing. And saying you're afraid of a Muslim is kind of like saying you're afraid of a Christian. I mean, there's a bazillion different sects and a bazillion different thoughts of how they do things. And we like to paint them with a broad brush, which feeds the narrative of jihadists. And that's hard to, you can't break that cycle. I understand. I mean, if every time you found, John Wayne Gacy killed somebody, if every time you went to a serial killer, you found Pogo the Clown stuff, you wouldn't want to hire a clown to come to your birthday party anymore.
Right.
So, I understand that. But that's what I would do. I would stop the spread of that.
Okay, so what we can all do now is just look at each person as a person and treat them
exactly.
like a person and not a category, a stereotype
Right.
category.
I mean, we have, as Americans, we have the ability to discern guy that gets up in a Las Vegas tower and kills everybody at a rock concert. We don't immediately then broad brush paint everybody that has a beard and is a Caucasian as a killer. But we lose that ability when it comes to terrorism.
Gotcha. Well, your new book launches today, new Pike Logan Thriller, Operator Down, and people can get it where?
They can get it anywhere. It's all major bookstores, Amazon, all over. If they want to read an excerpt, they can go to my website, bradtaylor.books.com. They can read an excerpt just about every book I've written.
Yeah, that's a great website, by the way. And I went to Amazon just for the heck of it while we were on one of the breaks, and you're already a best-selling. This book is already a national bestseller on Amazon.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it. I haven't checked yet.
Yeah. You're trending in 3 categories on Amazon. Good. You're doing really, really well, and I hit some international sites, and you're beginning to trend on those sites as well.
Oh.
So I'm
great to hear.
Fully expecting by tomorrow we'll hear New York Times and all of that other stuff for this new wonderful book.
That'll take a week.
Yeah,
they cultivate a whole week's worth of data.
Yeah, which a week is so quickly nowadays in this world. And you're going to be here on January 14th at the Vero Beach Book Center at 3 p.m. And I know the books are available there, and we're really looking forward to having you here in town with us.
Yeah, I really enjoy Vero Beach. It's a great site.
Yeah. Last words you'd like to share with my listeners?
I just hope they enjoy the book. That's the main reason I write, is the reader gets a thrill ride who really enjoys.
Yeah, I mean, your books are truly exceptional books, and I recommend everybody go binge read them, because it's way better than just binge watching Netflix or Game of Thrones or any of those TV things, because you paint, Brad, such an amazing picture of your characters and the situations that they're in, that to me, the TV of my brain reading your books is so much better than the actual TV.
Well, thank you very much. It's a high compliment. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's a joy having you on the show today. And I'm looking forward to meeting you next week when you come into town. Good luck with this incredible book tour you're doing in Arizona today, and then you're going to Houston, Texas, the 10th. Since I have people listening around the world, you can catch them in Houston on January 10th, St. Louis, January 11th, Minneapolis, the 12th, Virginia, the 13th. I hope you get some okay weather when you're doing some of these, Brad, because there's some snowstorms coming through.
I know. I'm worried about that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I wish you nothing but the best success with the newest book and whatever your next one is that you're writing. Thanks so much for being here on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Everybody grab a copy of Operator Down. I love it. I'm going to give it a 5-star review. You know I don't give those out just for anybody. And I'm actually going to post a review up on Amazon and a few other places. I think it's a great book, worth the read. Remember, everybody, the right questions truly can change your life. So what are you asking today? Don't forget, hug someone you love. Have a great day, everyone.
You've been listening to It's All About the Questions, starring Laura Stewart. Connect with Laura at it'sallaboutthequestions.com and download a free workbook that will help you ask better questions starting today.